Okay, let's go ahead and dive into things after I sneeze. I know it's in there somewhere. Is that? Who's a bright light around here? I'll sneeze in a minute. Okay, so again, thank you for coming tonight. This is the second of the workshops that we will have. We have 3 workshops per term, and we haven't decided what the content of the third one will be, but we will be going through and meeting about that very shortly. This workshop is, as all workshops are, an important workshop because it teaches you something about an aspect of research that people don't get exposed to as often as they should, but it's becoming increasingly important. All right? How many of you have ever heard of scientific fraud? Okay. Tell me what you've ever heard about scientific fraud. What do you know about that? What does scientific fraud mean? Madison?
There is a guy, well, this is an example of scientific fraud. There's a guy in England that published false results for his research that he did. He got caught recently and was put in prison.
Yeah, one of the most famous incidences of scientific fraud is the one that Madison's referring to. It was a person in England back in the 1990s, and here's the sign-up sheet for tonight, who published an outrageous finding. And the finding that he published said that vaccines cause autism. How many have ever heard vaccines cause autism? How many people think vaccines cause autism? Well, that's good. The reason people think that, and there's a lot of people who really think that, is because this scientific fraud went out and infected the minds of the world. Okay? It turned out it was not true. It was actually fraudulent work that this person did. Okay? Published the work, and everybody said, oh, it's scientific research, so therefore autism is caused by vaccines. And so there's a whole generation of people that haven't gone out there and gotten vaccines. Meanwhile, we're seeing things like whooping cough killing people. We're seeing measles at Disneyland. We're seeing diseases that are very easily prevented with vaccines that are arising because people think that vaccines cause autism. It doesn't do it. Okay? So there's a really good example of where scientific fraud has had a major impact on human health. We can imagine that there's other areas where scientific fraud might have some very nasty consequences for people living in the world. Yeah?
Did he explain why he made this fraudulent information?
We'll talk a little bit about that. It's a good question. And one of the questions is, why do people do fraudulent things? Have you guys ever lied? Have you guys, what's that? A hidden agenda? Well, he created a hidden agenda. That's certainly true. This is a good point of discussion. Yeah.
To get fame.
To get fame. So people make up things sometimes to get fame. I saw a hand back here. Was that yours? Over here. Madison?
To live up to inflated standards of excellence. That does happen a lot. People lie because they can't be good enough for what the boards want.
So to get an inflated sense of you said excellence, is that what it was?
To satisfy the inflated.
Satisfy. Okay, okay. That's an element. Yes. Funding. Funding. Yeah, yeah. You know, as scientists, we live by the funding that we get. And we get funding by writing grants, and we get grants by making a name for ourselves, being established with a big finding. All of those things contribute to that. Did you have a comment also? Well, revenge, to be honest, I don't think that revenge is typically a cause of scientific dishonesty. I think revenge is oftentimes a cause of dishonesty in general. Okay? I'm going to get back at them, so I'm going to start telling lies about my boyfriend, right? For a good time call, right? That's how they used to do those, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think also if your results don't support your thesis, you might skew your data or
Okay.
your results.
So you might lie about something, or you might, shall we say, be biased at how you examine your data. Now, you guys are getting way ahead of where I was going to be, but that's fine. We'll talk about this. Is a good place to talk about these things, all right? So scientific fraud is a really, really nasty thing that can have some very big consequences. There are people who have died because of that scientific fraud. Okay? There were something like 50 children in California last year who died of whooping cough. Whooping cough is 100% preventable by a vaccine. Why did they die? Their parents believed, and it's still out there. A lot of people don't know that that was fraudulent work. Yeah?
In the town I came from, there was actually a case of polio that,
Polio. Yeah. Polio is 100% preventable by a vaccine. Smallpox, 100% preventable by vaccine. We eliminated smallpox from the face of the earth by vaccinating everybody. Today, we wouldn't be able to do that. That's pretty scary. It's pretty stupid, right? So this is really nasty stuff. All right. So let's talk about then, I hope I've given you some introduction about why the study of ethics is important. Before we get into this too far, I want to say a word about what the word ethics means. All right? We have a notion of what that means, but there are many dimensions to ethics. So when I say the word ethics to you, tell me what comes to your mind in terms of what constitutes ethics. Yeah. Morality. Morality is a central core of ethics, right? What else?
just like the right thing.
The right thing. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
So something like I think that a lot of us usually know what the right thing is.
Mm-hmm.
So like what is true or good, not to like hurt someone, but purposely like make someone like help.
Okay. So it's a distinction between right and wrong. That would be safe to say, right? When you say the right thing, I think that's what you mean. Madison?
So morality as judged by a group of peers.
Okay.
So it's not
Morality,
what
yep.
everybody thinks is right.
Yep. So there's a commonality to it. I think that we all probably have the same general ethical perspective. And while there may be subtle differences that we have in what that perspective is, I think that we probably all have the same basic sense of what's right and wrong. What makes for morality? What makes for ethics? What are some of the constituents? Yeah. Parents, okay. Parents contribute to that, but I'm thinking about qualities, personal qualities that contribute to that. Yeah. Privacy, that's interesting. So privacy can be violated, right? And I think that we would agree that in many cases, violations of privacy are in fact unethical, right? So I think that's it. Yeah. Beneficence and non-maleficence, yes. Okay. Freedom of speech, okay.
Yeah, can we go back to the
Beneficence, yeah. Yeah. Sure.
Beneficence is not doing harm to someone and helping them, and non-maleficence is the opposite of
Right.
that and would be harming someone. It's the spectrum of
Looking out for the best for people. Yeah. Right. Sorry, I didn't mean to jump over that, but I saw a hand start going up. Okay. How about honesty? Is honesty a component of morality? All right. What else? Yeah.
autonomy.
Autonomy? Yep. How about integrity? Okay. So integrity is at the root of professionalism. We'll actually talk about professionalism later in the year. We actually have a workshop that we do on professionalism. If I say the word professionalism to you, what does that mean? What's professionalism? Acting like a professional. How does a professional act? Dignity. Okay, there's a good one. All right, and what? Poise. Okay, good. What else? Respect. Very good, very good. Do you want to interact with professionals or non-professionals? If you go to, it depends. Well, that's true. I would agree with that. If you go to your doctor, do you want your doctor to be a professional or not a professional? Okay, so what qualities does your doctor have that you want that person to have? In other words, what person you could look at and say, they're going to be a professional. They are professional in their interactions. I want them to be my doctor.
Knowledgeable.
Knowledgeable. Competent. Integrity, all these things, right? Okay. There's something that I think is really at the heart of professionalism, and that thing at the heart of professionalism is thinking of the person that you're dealing with before you think of yourself. You put the interests of your client, your patient, your whatever, ahead of your own interests. Okay? This can be a very difficult thing. If you want to go be a doctor, for example, you realize that saving people's lives may be more important than your kid's Little League game. And your kid's Little League game may be a very, very important thing. Right? But you've got a duty to people when you have those things. You have responsibility, and so responsibility is another category. Did you have a comment?
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, I always like the idea of, like, if a bunch of people graduate from, doctorate school, and then, you want the person that graduated at the top of the class.
Top of the class, okay. So that's the knowledgeable part, right? So you want that person to be knowledgeable. You want them to be tireless. You want them working for you, right? Oh, man, it's late. I got to go home. Man, I'm dying here, right? Yeah. That's not what you want to hear out of your emergency room physician, is it? Okay? So these are important qualities. So ethics encompasses many of these things. As we've noted, we're going to see, I made a list myself before class, and I've got them coming up on the screen. Some of these things that we've talked about already pop up there. They're rooted in the idea of what's right and wrong, what's fair and unfair. How many of you ever feel like you've been treated unfairly? What did that feel like? Bad or mad? You get mad if you're treated unfairly, don't you?
Almost less mad and more helpless. I couldn't fix this.
Okay, helpless. That's a very good observation. Helpless. When people feel like they've been treated unfairly, they strike out. When you hear of fights and see fights that happen and so forth, fights oftentimes happen because the people fighting have an element of unfairness associated with that. Okay? Alcohol is frequently involved in these, and the reason alcohol is frequently involved is alcohol sort of enlarges that sense of fairness and unfairness. And that's why people tend to get a little bit more punchy, shall we say, when they're drunk. Okay? All right. Ethics helps define acceptable and unacceptable behaviors. Okay? We think of ethics as a framework that defines the bounds of these principles. What does that mean? The bounds of these principles. What's acceptable and unacceptable? How does ethics do that? Yeah. Give me an example.
Like, maybe.
Okay, that's fine. Somebody else. Yeah.
It also indicates that ethics can change over time. Because if the morals of whoever framed these boundaries, if those shift, then they.
Well, I want to be careful with that. I want to be careful with that thought. I won't say that there may be some shifts that happen, but for example, murder is unethical. I think we would agree with that. Right? And I don't think we would shift that bound. What's that? Yeah, yeah, okay, right. Back here and then back up here. Yeah. Social standards and social contracts. Okay. Can you think of an example?
Well, I guess like I was considering what you said, and like to bring up the
Okay.
I
Sure.
think technology and like how healthcare like the world has evolved so much.
Okay.
You have to think of you have to like
Okay, Madison, then I'll come back over here.
So I would definitely agree with what you're saying about how ethics change throughout time. There has been a large change in ethics in just the past 60 years after the advent of biomedical ethics in itself, because there's things like the Tuskegee study where they gave a large population of African males syphilis just to see what would happen, and that's no longer ethical.
Yeah, we're going to
It's
talk.
done in
We're going to talk about that in just a little bit. Actually, it's a very good point. Ethics is not something that's rigid. We hope that the standards are fairly good, but it's a very good point that people's perspectives change. Okay.
And also the technologies changed, like with PCB and in vitro fertilization, the rules around that
Right.
are very ambiguous right now.
So 50 years ago, we didn't think about what stem cell research was. And now all of a sudden there are people who say, that's very wrong, and other people say, oh, that's the best thing that's going to save us, right? And so somewhere there's going to be a line that's going to be drawn. And right now we're in the sort of midst of that, right? So,
There's
good point.
moratorium right now about that.
There is, to some extent. You're right.
So I guess I think that there is like we all have a sense of ethics and like we all agree on a certain portion. But I think like when it comes down to it, we all have an extremely like different idea of what is ethical and what is not.
Give me an example of something that you see as a gray area.
So I'm just gonna throw it out there, like euthanasia.
Okay.
I think like a long time.
So not everybody agrees on that. Okay, right? Yeah. Yeah.
Like euthanizing.
This side of the room is strangely silent.
You're using a lot of big words over there, and I'm not necessarily prepared for that.
Then give me some little words. What's that? Contemplative. Okay, that's fine. But I want some feedback from some other people as well. Somebody who hasn't spoken so far. What's an ethical framework, guys? Yeah.
I think that obviously ethics are not fixed because they are taught. I think they exist individually in the minds of anyone, and we wouldn't have to teach them to other people.
Okay.
So
Can we?
ethics are not the same for everyone. They exist individually.
Okay. So I want to be careful here, because I think what we're doing is we're getting confused by some specific examples, but I would wager that all of us would agree on general principles. We would agree that honesty is important. Right?
Not everyone.
I don't know. Do you?
I do.
Okay. Is there anybody in here who doesn't agree that honesty is important? I would wager that everybody would agree on that.
Are you saying everyone on the planet? Because that's just
We're not talking about the planet. We're talking about this classroom. Okay. All right. So I could find people on the planet who believe mass murder is great, but that doesn't make the concept of mass murder being wrong, right? So I don't have to think about the planet. I have to think about people in general, right? That's what we're thinking about when we're talking about ethics. Okay? Honesty, right? Integrity. Some of the concepts that we talked about already, I think we would all agree they're very important from an ethical perspective. What's that? No. What'd you say? Professionalism. Absolutely. These are all rooted in professionalism. These are the very core of these things. Okay. Now, I'm belaboring this point. Let's move forward. Okay? We are in the process, in doing research, of finding new information. We are looking for truth. Truth is a very important concept, right? Is this true? Is this true? Sometimes we find things that are true that astonish us that are true, right? But that doesn't make them untrue, it just makes them surprising. So we're seeking truth as we're doing research. We are bound to finding the truth, whatever it is. Whatever it is. And in this age that we live in this age in which all of you have been raised, this has been an age where that concept of truth, unfortunately, has been very malleable. Malleable meaning very or reshaped. Truth has become ideological. There are ideological perspectives to truth that aren't rooted in truth. Does anybody know what I'm talking about when I say ideological principles? What are ideological principles? Well, I just want to know what's an ideology, first of all. Yeah.
Kind of like a grand idea that would never be attainable. Something that's perfect.
It's not ideal. No. It's more related to perspective. So it's a way of looking at the world, okay? And that way of looking at the world is so strong, that's why you're thinking the ideal, is so strong that it skews the way that people perceive things. Consequently, if the quest is ideology and not truth, we frequently see this in the political arena, if the quest is ideology and not truth, then everything that you see will be colored by your ideology, not by the findings of what you have.
So is it kind of like how you think life should be? And you try to
Not life, it's the way that you see the world. How you see, or how you interpret an event that happens. Or how you think that, let's say you have the perspective that stem cell research is awful. That's an ideology. That's not a truth. That's not a, I mean, it's an opinion. But it's, what's that? It is a belief of ideas. Yes. Okay? So if you have that perspective, anything that you find that will reinforce that, okay, you will be biased for. So bias enters into this. Yes, two back here.
Obviously we all agree that professionalism is part, professional is what we want to do.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And you will be.
But there are many people that are professional that aren't necessarily ethical.
Oh, very good. There are many people who are professional who are not ethical, but then that kind of colors our perspective of them as professionals, right?
Well, I mean, obviously the researcher that produced the pseudoscience about autism,
Yep.
he was regarded as a professional and
Until,
okay.
you see? So this is why the ethical consideration and what you raised. What's your name?
I'm Becky.
Becky. What Becky's raised is a very important point. By being less than professional, by being less than ethical, what we do is we damage our entire profession. Okay? There are a lot of people, when they hear about scientific fraud, who are not scientists. What's their opinion? Those goddamn scientists, they'll say anything to get what they want, right? Ethics is in a very important principle for that reason. Yes? Well, truth is an abstract idea. I will grant you that. Okay? So we're not going to try to dissect truth. I want to keep truth in a very simple context here so that we can understand that. But you're right. Truth is a very complex notion that we're not going to try to dissect. Okay? Okay. Let's move forward. All right. Ethics. We said honesty, right? Honesty is important. Do you like honesty in relationships?
Yeah, it's pretty good.
You do to a point, don't you? Does this outfit make me look ugly? Right? Does what I'm wearing, and you might think, well, you know, it really does, but I'm not going to say that to hurt your feelings. Right?
Well, like in the same sense, if I ask the doctor if I have like, oh, do I have terminal cancer? They're like, well, I don't want to hurt your feelings, so that's not a relationship. That's like a doctor.
But your point's a good one. That's true, right? So it is a professional relationship. What would you expect of your doctor? And that's a good question. What would you expect of your doctor that you might not expect out of your significant other? You expect the doctor to tell you if that tumor really does make your face look wrong, right?
So it's the degree of honesty that varies depending on your relationship. Like, I'd want brutal honesty from my doctor, but
Less brutal from other people. Yeah, I think there's some truth in that. I think there's truth in that, okay? Honesty, objectivity. There's an important, what's objectivity?
Not letting your ideology affect the outcome.
I could not have said it better. Did you hear what he said? Objectivity takes your ideology out of your observation. Okay? That's a really important thing. Now, most of you are going to be involved in projects that will have nothing to do with your own ideology. So these concepts that we're talking about here can affect other areas. It would be unusual for a project you would be involved in to have your ideology affect things, but what you said is exactly right. Yes, ma'am? Of ideology affecting your perspective. Well, the example I gave earlier of stem cells. So let's imagine that you say, well, stem cell research is just, you know, it's awful because it's involving fetal tissue, and we can't do research on fetal tissue, and therefore anything that I find that would convince me that there's something wrong about this, I'm going to report. That would be where my ideology was affecting the truth of what I actually found. Okay? By picking and choosing the data points that support your notion, you've engaged in scientific dishonesty. Did you know that? When you pick and choose the things that support your notion, you've engaged in scientific dishonesty. Does that help? Integrity. Carefulness. What is carefulness? How does carefulness affect this? Okay, affects the research. How does it affect the research?
Both how you perform it and how you present it.
Okay, it does. How you perform it and how you present it. And there's one other element that I can think of. Anybody else think of what the other element is? Okay, I hadn't thought about analysis, but analysis is a very good point. She said present it. Yep. Okay. How you record it. How you record it. Okay. If you're really sloppy in the way that you're making note of what's happening, then you're not being careful. And though you might not be dishonest, right? If you're not being careful about what you record, then that means the accuracy of what you're recording is not great. Therefore, the findings that you make will be could be just as wrong as if you were making things up. So carefulness is an important concept, right? Openness. Why openness? What is openness? What does open mean in scientific research? Madison?
being very clear about who's funding your research and why you're doing it and all your reasons behind it and what you're actually doing.
Okay. So being open about funding sources and so forth. Yes, Becky?
I was saying openness is like the entirety of the truth. So all of it, not just...
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. Openness, the entirety of the truth. Did you hear what she said? The entirety of the truth. This comes back to the I'm going to pick and choose the data points that support my conclusion. That's not open, right? But here's all the data. You can look at it and see if you come to the same conclusion I do. Really important thing. Really important thing. Okay? Confidentiality. Whoa. We just said we've got to be open. Now we've got to be confidential. What does that mean? I threw you a curveball. Madison.
Keeping the sources of your research confidential, like if you take donations
So some types of research involve personal information. Again, not much of what you will be involved in, but some of you might. If you're working, for example, in certain types of engineering, you may have occasions where you're working with information from people. Information regarding people is a confidential relationship, and breaking that confidentiality will, first of all, get you kicked out of any laboratory that you're going to work in. It could affect your career way down the line because of that. And so maintaining that confidentiality, just like a physician would maintain confidential the notion of their relationship with you, or a lawyer would maintain that confidentiality, so too do you need to maintain that confidentiality of information regarding anything having to do with people. Yes?
Yeah, so confidentiality in regard like protecting people, not businesses.
Okay, protecting people. I wouldn't say not businesses, but protecting people in general. And there may be actually cases where even businesses are brought under that cloak. Okay? But people do come first, no question. Responsibility, I think we have a pretty good notion of that. Respect, there's one we haven't said. Why is respect important? Where does respect come into the equation for ethics? You're working with people. So anytime you're working with people, respect is an important consideration. Yes?
You should respect the people that you're with. You should respect yourself and your own morality. And you should respect the research that you're doing. Because even if
okay.
what you think in your head, if what happens is different, then you have to respect that that's the truth and not what you think should happen.
Respect comes in at many levels, and you've identified several right there. You've said you need to respect the research. You need to respect perhaps the guidelines of the research. You need to respect yourself. You need to respect the integrity of data, respect the analysis. And I can think of at least one other very big item for respect. It crosses the boundaries of scientific research. What do we need to respect? Ideas. What does that mean? It's not a pop quiz. You need to respect the views. Put the two of you together and we got it. You need to respect the views of those who don't agree with you. You need to respect the views of those who don't agree with you. In the real world and in the political world, people scream, people shout. I'm sure you've all gotten involved in a Facebook shout at some point, right? Scientists don't shout. Scientists can disagree, all right? But this element of respect is very important. I beg to differ is okay. You're an idiot is not okay. Okay? All right. All right, legality. I just jumped ahead too. I didn't mean to do that. Legality and animal care, okay? Legality. How does legality enter into it? Yep.
Make sure that everything you're doing in your research is absolutely legal.
So there may be bounds of things that you can work on that may be governed by a legal environment, stem cell research being a really good example. Becky?
In our introduction to biomass, they were talking about, they were talking about like studying abroad and how a lot of times you get to work closely with doctors in other countries and they'll offer the students to like do the procedure.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't matter how simple or how complicated the procedure is, it's illegal because you're not.
Yes. What if somebody offered you the chance to do a surgery? Pretty tempting, isn't it? Well, it's legal there. Is it? If it's legal there, is it ethical here? I see people saying no. I want to know why not. I think we would all pretty much agree it's not. Why is it not?
What's like the word for it? You don't have the experience or the legal
The knowledge.
that you know how to perform that.
Yeah, it's legal there, but being legal there doesn't mean it's ethical, because if you don't have the knowledge, the proper knowledge to do it, you're endangering a person because of that. And because knowledge is a very central principle to something that's ethical, we have to respect that. Yes?
So if you have the knowledge of how to do it and the skills to do it, you just haven't proven that to the government, is it ethical and illegal?
The problem with that is that you can't be the decider of that. You can't decide I have the skills and the knowledge to do it. You have to be. That's why we have licensing. And so that verifies that. So we have somebody besides you who says that. Whenever you're in the situation where you decide, I have enough knowledge to do that, then people will always have a bias in their own direction. And that's why we want external evaluation of those. So no, that would not be legal. Or ethical, I should say. It might be legal, but it would not be ethical. Okay? Yeah. Yeah.
So if you're in an opportunity where somebody is like letting you do that, then
Yeah.
isn't that them telling you that you have the knowledge to do it and you have the ability because they're putting you in that situation that you're able to do it?
The question that I asked, though, was legal there versus ethical here. So because you haven't been licensed to do that here, it would not be ethical for you to do it even if someone there allowed you to do that. Okay? Now, I'll take the two of you's arguments and put you into a scenario where perhaps you would say it is ethical. Let's imagine that you are at a disaster. And there are thousands of people who've been hit by, Hurricane Victor, right? And Hurricane Victor, and there's not enough medical personnel there to deal with. And you might be called upon to do more than you would otherwise be trained to do. In an unusual circumstance like that, you might consider that ethical. Okay? That could be considered ethical with the proper training and so forth. But only under an extremely unusual circumstance would that be appropriate. Okay? You agree or not agree?
It's just kind of different than what I was saying.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah, back there.
So if someone was injured and they used CPR, first aid, would it be ethical and you weren't certified? So would it be ethical to help them or not?
Okay, so good questions. This is a very good discussion. Somebody's injured, you said CPR, first aid. First aid, you can pretty much administer. CPR is, you're supposed to be trained to do CPR. Is it more ethical to let them die, or is it ethical to take care of them? Okay, so I think we would pretty much agree trying to take care of them would be appropriate. The problem that you can run into with this, and this is important to understand, this is again why we have external licensing, is that what you do is you open yourself up to lawsuit if something goes wrong. That's why they certify people for CPR. And again, it's like the licensing that I'm talking about. Once you've been certified for CPR, the element of lawsuit is taken away because then the liability goes from you to the group that trained you to do the CPR. So yes, I would agree with you. You would probably say, yes, I'm going to do what I can to help this person, but recognize that that could ultimately be problematic for you. Becky, and then back over here. Yeah.
I think it just comes back to putting someone else's needs before your own.
Yeah.
So if someone's going to die, I'm more worried about maybe trying to save their life than getting fined or not.
I agree completely. I'm just making, my job is to make you aware of things, not to make a decision for you. Yes, sir.
So there are good Samaritan laws which protect you.
Yep.
So if you administer first aid, even if you're doing it completely wrong and you're pounding on their face and blowing on their chest, you cannot be sued under the good Samaritan laws unless you do it for 5 minutes and then stop. You have to do it until the paramedics arrive, until you're completely exhausted, or until they're completely dead. That's
The laws vary from state to state. So you want to be careful with saying that's the law, because there's no one law. That's right. Okay. Yes.
So I have a question from the opposite side of the spectrum.
Yes.
So, for example, if you got your CPR certification in 7th grade,
Uh-huh.
and you had it for up until the very end of when it was still you were legally certified, but you had no idea what you were doing because you just did it in middle school health class, would it be ethical for you to try and save somebody's life, even though you're licensed and stuff, but you realistically don't know what you're doing?
Well, I'm not an ethicist, all right? I think that we can think of gray areas. And it's useful to think of gray areas and discuss gray areas. But I'll give you my answer, and then you can take it for what it's worth. My answer would be that, again, coming back to the principle I think Becky said, that making sure that you're putting somebody before yourself is the most important thing that you can do. And so if that's your guiding principle, then I would use that as my decision in terms of what I needed to do here. If I felt that a person's life was absolutely dependent on me doing something, I would do it. Okay? So that, I think, would override every other consideration I would have. But, you know, at that point, I'm probably not going to sit and debate the ethics of it. I'll be honest. I probably wouldn't. Yes, Becky?
I'd also like to point out that, like, CPR, even if it's done by a professional, if there's, like, not an AED there, like, it usually does not work. So
CPR you can't save everybody. If we could, nobody would ever die. Animal care. How about animal care? What's the ethics of scientific research regarding animal care? Do we need to worry about that? Madison?
Yeah, it's very important to make sure that the animals are being treated humanely, even if some of the aspects of the research are inhumane, just that you have everything as humane as possible, and you have to be certified by a third party and stuff like that.
For the same reason we don't want to hurt people, we also want to be as ethical as we can in our treatment of animals. And while we may do things using animals that we would not be able to do using people, we still want to be appropriate with that, as humane with that as we possibly can. Let me tell you a little bit about animals as regards scientific research. If you work at a university or you work at any place that's funded by federal money, you will be required by law to have at your facility a group, I can't think of the right word I want, a department, as it were, that looks out for the well-being of animals. They're called animal care facilities. And so they ensure that animals used in research are treated humanely, that they're fed appropriately, that they're taken care of, and that there's not other things that are done to them that would be inhumane or inappropriate. It doesn't mean sometimes that animals won't be sacrificed or something like that, because that is a necessary part of research sometimes. But even there, we want the treatment to be humane. Okay? So that's a very important thing to remember, okay? That there's always a group that looks out for animal care. How about humans? Humans are animals. Is there a group that looks out for humans, do you think? Psychologists, okay. How many think that there's a group on campus that looks out for the well-being of human beings in research? How many think that? How many? Yeah, so I'm asking, is there a group on campus that looks out for the welfare of human beings in research or not? Raise your hand if you think that there is. Okay. The answer is absolutely. Okay? Absolutely. Every single federally funded research project, whether it's at a private group or it's at a university, every single one requires what's called a group called the Institutional Review Board. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Institutional Review Board in a little bit. It's called IRB. And it's federally required. And here's something that may surprise you. What may surprise you is they don't just work with people who are getting cut on, although that's one group of people that is protected by IRB. The IRB will be involved in any research that involves human beings for which the people doing research plan to publish their results. Everybody who's doing research plans to publish their results. So when I say involving human beings, what does that mean? Well, cutting on people, that involves human beings, right? Doing psychological experiments on people, that involves human beings. Yeah?
would that even involve, like, almost like a census type thing? Like, if you're like, oh, this many people walk by the MU every day. Would that...
Okay, it's a very good question, because you're getting into a gray area. Let me give you an example of where that you would have to do an IRB approval for something like what you're talking about. Let's imagine you decide that I'm interested in the people that are found in the Memorial Union at 11 o'clock in the morning. And I think that there may be some difference in, let's say, women tend to be more in the Memorial Union in the morning and men tend to be more in the Memorial Union in the evening. Let's say that's your idea. So you decide you're going to go and you're going to put a little questionnaire down and you're going to ask every person to X on the questionnaire. I am male, I am female. That will require IRB approval. Surveys require IRB approval. Okay? Because they involve human beings. Yes?
Do you have to get IRB approval for the surveys that we're doing in STEM leaderships?
Good question. In the surveys that we're doing in STEM leadership, we are not planning to publish.
Oh, right, of course.
Right? So the plan to publish is part of it. However, in joining the STEM leaders, we will have you fill out what's called approval forms for various things that we will ask you to do where there will be research that's involved. And you're not required to. It's very important to understand that there's nothing that gives your consent, they're called consent forms, is a requirement of you. Okay? And I'm going to talk a lot more about that in just a little bit. Okay? So I'm running late. I better keep this going. Okay. Intellectual property. Another consideration. What's intellectual property? What is that?
Any ideas or methods that have been copyrighted?
Any methods or ideas that come from people, basically. Okay? All right. Now, I want you to take just a couple of minutes and break up into groups of, let's say, each table. Each table, I want you to identify 3 types of dishonesty that a researcher might be involved in. This will just take a couple minutes based on what we've been talking about. Everybody, quick, go. You can join this table. You don't have to sit by yourself. You know there are people who want to take research outside the U.S. so that they can bypass laws here? A little scary, guys.
Pretty nifty.
Oh, yeah. Really nifty if you're wanting to violate the law. What'd you guys come up with? Why?
It might make you seem more reputable and you don't have to go through all the same work as someone who actually did it.
So it's a shortcut? Okay. Why would somebody do what you guys talked about?
To get funding, maybe, or more funding.
Okay, so they're trying to get funding. Funding's important. How about here?
Because maybe somebody believes or they agree on that.
So ideology interfered. And how about here?
Greed.
Greed. Greed is probably as... It can be. It can be. Which is why being careful and being informed is important. I agree. Okay. All right, we're running short on time, so I'm going to move quickly through these. All right? Ethics are central to scientific investigation. Ethics are necessary to protect participants. So when we do research that involves human beings, or we do research that involves animals, we really need to be careful, especially careful, that we're protecting the things that we're studying. That means we have training requirements. Training requirements may teach us the importance of privacy that we've talked about, being appropriate in our interactions with people or the animals that we are using. Okay? And 2 federal agencies that fund a lot of biological research are the National Science Foundation and the National Institutes of Health. These 2 agencies are the driving force for federally funded ethical considerations. Any grant that each of those agencies funds requires every single investigator to go through ethics training. Every single investigator to go through ethics training. Okay? Other trainings may be necessary. If you're working with radioactive material, for example, which might be common in some laboratories, you will have to learn the appropriate ways to handle, dispose of radioactive material. If you're working with hazardous chemicals, you may have similar restrictions for you. Human subjects are particularly of importance in terms of understanding. All right? Madison earlier brought up the Tuskegee syphilis experiments. How many people have heard of the Tuskegee syphilis experiments? Okay, I'm going to say just a few words about them. The Tuskegee syphilis experiments were started in the 1930s. And they were started before a treatment for syphilis was available. That treatment being penicillin. Okay? Syphilis is a venereal disease, a sexually transmitted disease, and it has horrible implications. Okay? They selected a group of about 600 people, about half of which they were African American males, and about half of them had syphilis, and about half of them did not have syphilis. And they wanted to understand what the long-term consequences of having syphilis were on human beings. And so they followed those people over their lifetimes. And even though a treatment for syphilis became available in the 1940s that completely eradicated it, the investigators in this study did not make it available to the participants because it would interrupt their study. Consequently, half of the African American males who were the subjects of this study died of syphilis, transmitted it to their spouses and to their offspring. It's one of the most god-awful examples of scientific research gone wrong in the United States. It's a blemish on research. It was the Tuskegee experiments that really began people talking about and thinking about the importance of being ethical in dealing with human beings. It was not wrong to start the experiment. They were interested in understanding how it was, what the consequences of having syphilis were, but when they did not look out for the welfare of the people participating in the survey, they crossed a big line. That's why it's important to be aware of the things that involve human beings. How many have heard of the Milgram study? Oh, okay, more than I would have guessed. The Milgram study is an interesting one. The Milgram study was one that demonstrated people's attention to authority. They involved electrical shocks. Do you have a question? I'm sorry? It is not the Stanford prison experiment. No, no. Okay. So this experiment, they had a person like myself conducting the experiment, and they had two other people. One person is over here, and they're trying to train this other person over here. So they would read them something and then ask them a question. And if they got the question right, everything was okay. And if they got the question wrong, they would get an electrical shock. Okay? And so that the person administering this would know what the electrical shock was, they gave them the initial electrical shock, which is a mild shock that they would get. But then they were told that every time the other person over here got the answer wrong, they were going to increase the voltage by 25 volts. They didn't do it. But they told this person that they were going to do that. So the person over here is an actor. The person over here doesn't know that. And so they ask the question, they get it wrong, the person has gotten the electrical shock, they figure, okay, I can handle that, fine. And the person goes, ow, right? They ask them another one, they get it wrong, and the person goes, ee, ow. They start out at something like 75 volts. Supposedly by the end, they got up to 450 volts, and this person over here is in such excruciating pain that this person over here is just going, I can't do it, I can't do it. And the professor standing up here says, I'm sorry, but you must. And they all did it. No matter how much pain they thought this person was in over here, they all went and they did it. And they did it why? They did it because the person in authority was telling them what to do. There are times when you have to say no. But this tells us that it's built into our human nature that we respond to authority, even if the consequences are very, very large. Yes?
Is that the one with the recording?
They did some recording, yes.
No, it was like, it wasn't even a person, it was just a recording saying,
There's different ways that the experiment's performed. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So now we require research that involves human beings to be, the approval must come before the experiment is done. When you want to do work with human beings, you have to propose exactly what you're going to do. If you're asking a questionnaire, you have to have the questionnaire completely approved before we even start. You guys will be asked to participate in a study for a project that Sophie and I are running, and you don't have to participate. Right? If I told you you had to participate, what would you do? You'd probably say, I'm going to participate. You don't have to participate. So, but you will ask to be signed a consent where you'll participate. And you're going to fill out a survey is what you're going to do. We're not going to shock you, I promise. All right? But the point is that we had to have all the questions together to get that approval before we ever even started the experiment. So that everybody knows exactly what's going to happen before we do the survey. Yes, Becky?
So a lot of like the idea of like ethics is that there are some questions that we're never going to answer, even though like we want to. Like there's the idea of like the untestable experiment, like you put a child like through the child totally without any contact.
Yep. There are experiments that we will never perform. There are experiments we will never perform, yeah. And that's a really good example. Really good example. Okay. All right. Now, when we think about research in human beings, we can think there's different levels of concern, right? I'm guessing we would say that an experiment that involved a survey is probably not as hazardous as one that might involve, let's say, injecting somebody with radioactivity. And yes, that is done. And it's necessary for medical research sometimes. Okay? A vulnerable group. What's a vulnerable group or a vulnerable person?
Minority.
Minority? What makes them vulnerable?
They might not have the power or information to protect themselves.
They might not have the power to protect themselves. I like that. Are you a vulnerable group from me? You are. You are. Why? Because if this were a class and I had some control over your grade, right, I would have a power structure that would allow me to say, you're going to do this. So you become a vulnerable group. It's very possible to be a vulnerable group with that. Hand over here, question. Mentally disabled. Not able to participate or not able to make the decisions that a person without that disability might have. Yes? Informed consent. So I'm coming to that, and it's a very good point. Informed consent is what we will be working for. Yes, sir? Homeless and economically deprived. Excellent, excellent.
I think like a big, like really vulnerable group is like the uneducated. I think that's why like.
Excellent. Uneducated. If you can't understand what's going on, you can't give consent, right?
Well, I think it's
At least not informed consent. Right? And we want informed consent is what we want. Do you have a comment? Babies, children, minors, all important. Okay, let's see what I came up with. I said prisoners. Oh, yeah. Prisoners are definitely a vulnerable group, aren't they? The warden is going to kick your butt. Children. Okay, you got that one. Pregnant women. Economically disadvantaged. Educationally disadvantaged. People in subordinate positions. That's you. Okay? And those aren't the only ones. Those are some examples. Those are some examples. Okay. Studies needing IRB approval. Surveys. Interviews. Interviews. If I'm going to interview you and then write down what you say and then publish that somewhere else, I need your approval in order to do that. Physically invasive procedures. We could imagine, I don't know, doing exploratory surgery on your kidney might be a little bit of an issue. So, the whole principle here is we want to have informed consent. We want the people who participate in scientific research. And believe me, we need people to participate in scientific research because if we don't have that people component, then how will we go forward? How many people take medicine? Everybody takes medicine. And everybody knows that medicines are approved because of experiments on people. Right? If we don't have people willing to participate in scientific research, then we will have no medicine. We will have no advances as they involve people. So informed consent is important. Participants have to be informed of what is being studied. They must voluntarily agree to participate without coercion. It's going to be really hard to get a prisoner to participate without there being some element of coercion, right? They're not in prison because they want to be there. Participants may decline to participate without consequences or disadvantage. Kevin, I don't want to participate, and you can't flunk me out of class because of that. And that's exactly right. Okay? So we want you to do it voluntarily. We want you to participate without coercion. The approval has to be documented, and records must be kept. I have to keep records of everything for several years after the study is complete. Okay? Can't do anything until the approval is obtained. The person in charge has got to be a senior OSU person, a faculty member like myself. And all members of the research team have to undergo ethics training and pass an exam because, again, it involves human subjects. Okay. Briefly, another area of interest is that of intellectual property. Intellectual property, we've mentioned earlier, are ideas and inventions. And I want to make you aware of two different types of intellectual property. Okay? Copyrights and patents. Anybody know the difference between copyrights and patents?
Copyright is on an idea of some sort, a patent's on some sort of method or a physical thing.
That's right. So copyrights have to do with ideas or creative works. Books are under copyright. Photographs are under copyright. Paintings are under copyright. Plays are under copyright. Recordings are under copyright. Videos are under copyright. Patents involve processes or inventions. Okay? If you invent a new microprocessor, you will seek patent protection, not copyright protection. Okay? They have different ways that they're protected. All right? But inventions involve processes, they involve things that didn't exist before, that are not creative or solely creative in nature. Yes, Becky? At the time of penicillin, a patent wasn't available. I think you're thinking of polio. The person who did the polio vaccine chose not to protect it with patent, and that's why the polio vaccine was so widespread and why it was so available. But it was the polio inventor. Yeah, that's right. Imagine that today, folks. Imagine that today. Yes, the outrage of the person that bought that pill and changed it, right? Theft of intellectual property is the same as the theft of any other type of property. And believe me, if there's one place where you can get in trouble as college students, it's actually through theft of intellectual property. All right, be careful what you copy, guys. You just have to be careful what you copy. Just because it's on the internet doesn't mean it's free, doesn't mean it's legal. And every year we have students that get in trouble with pulling things off, copying and saving things that are not theirs to do that with. Okay, copyright and patent. All right. Now, and the last thing I want you to do, and then we'll finish, I want you to identify two ethical concerns you've heard. I tell you what, we'll do it right here. We'll raise hands. Give me one ethical concern you've heard about in the news or read about recently. Anybody? Exploiting people of lesser power. So torture would definitely fall into this category, right? You betcha. The what? Yeah, the guy buys the drug and raises the price of a pill up to $750. Is that was that an ethical concern? Why?
Because he was using a life-saving product for personal gain.
Isn't that what drugs are all about?
No, not at all. Wait, drugs are supposed to be...
What? Why does the pharmaceutical industry exist?
Well, the pharmaceutical industry exists
and make money. No, I'm not trying to pick on you here, but the reality is probably what he did was not illegal. I would say that it was certainly unreasonable, very, very unreasonable, but he didn't do anything outside the law. He could do anything he wanted to. If people decide